Are you holding back on travel plans because you're afraid of the language gap? Well, no need to mind the gap if you have Babbel. Speak like a whole new you with Babbel, the language learning app that gets you talking. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you talking a new language in 3 weeks because talking is the key to really knowing a language. Babbel is designed for real conversation. And I can say that that's true because I used Babbel before my recent trip. I went on to Germany, which is a language that I never studied before, but I really wanted to be just comfortable with things like navigating my way around a train station or a bus station, to be able to order food in a cafe, or to say I'm sorry if I bump into somebody on the street. And Babbel was perfect for that. So I was able to travel over there with confidence, knowing just a bit more German than I did before. Here's a special holiday deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/vulgar. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/vulgar, spelled BABBEL.com/vulgar. Rules and restrictions may apply.
I am such a fan of fall flavors and colors. It's definitely my favorite time of the year. And maybe it's because everyone's winding down from the chaos of summer, but I always get a feeling of resetting, restarting, or refreshing my style and routines around this time of year as well. So if you're in a similar place, or just want to include some extra goodies into your makeup selection, you can spice up your fall routine with Thrive Cosmetics. Whether you prefer a fresh-faced look or are leaning more into an autumn glam moment, Thrive Cosmetics beauty products are certified 100% vegan and cruelty-free. Everything is made with clean, skin-loving ingredients, high-performing and trademark formulas, and uncompromising standards. So it's easy to see why their bestsellers have thousands of 5-star reviews. You've probably seen videos about their Liquid Lash Extensions mascara, and I have to say it's absolutely worth the hype. It doesn't clump or flake throughout the course of the day, and most important to me, the tubing formula allows it to just slide off easily with some water, so I'm no longer looking like a raccoon when I attempt to remove my mascara. Plus, it's not just makeup that's good for you. When you purchase from Thrive, you're supporting a business that does good too. For every product sold, Thrive Cosmetics donates towards 8 major causes, including those impacted by cancer or domestic abuse, and veteran and education organizations. These causes matter to me, and I love knowing that a purchase I was going to make anyway is also helping in some way. So brighten up your fall look with Thrive Cosmetics. It's luxury beauty that gives back. Right now, you can get an exclusive 20% off your first order at thrivecosmetics.com/thrive. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/thrive for 20% off your first order.
Hello and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. My name is Anne Foster, and this is season 7, part 2. So this whole season, it's slowly winding away to talk about Marie Antoinette, and to do that, we're looking at the world around her and the people around her and kind of what was all going on. And last week, we started in on, I'm calling this section of the series, Meanwhile Back in France, because the first part was kind of in other countries like America. And so last time we started the saga of Jean Bessu, aka Madame du Barry, and we left things with a cliffhanger last week where she succeeded in doing the whatever it was, like 5 backward curtsies in her diamond encrusted gown, and she officially was introduced at court and became officially the maîtresse en titre, the official mistress of King Louis XV. What's going to happen next? I mean, based on the timeline, we're going to meet Marie Antoinette. She's going to be in this story. And the French Revolution is going to occur in the lifetime of this woman. So our special guest last week and this week is Amanda Matta. And I'm so happy to have her here on the show because this is, like, you could tell, what I'm guessing most people listening to this heard part 1 already. Like, this is her sweet spot. Amanda loves this story. She loves this time period. And I love having guests on where they get to talk about their favorite thing. So, we're going to get right into it. We're going to finish up this saga of Madame du Barry, and then I'll have some more information and news for you afterwards. And so she is put into this role that like is inherently political, but she doesn't care about that side of things. I think she's just happy to get that she saw Francesca had when she was young. It's just like her rooms, she decorates them. I think I read it was in the Joan Heza biography that like she chose like the best, most exquisite, furniture, paintings, everything. Like she had the best taste and her apartments were gorgeous. Like her style and her taste was just perfect. And she's just like living exactly the life she wanted, like just
Oh
being
my
this
gosh.
fancy person, bathing in roses. Like she's killing it. That's all she ever wanted.
She's basically getting princess perks without like, having to be a princess and actually represent the monarchy. They're mistress perks, I guess. But yeah, she becomes this like patroness of the arts, whether it's decorative arts or the fine arts, literature, philosophers. Madame de Pompadour before her had kind of patronized Voltaire. So like that's the realm we're operating in here. She would entertain, even at her morning levee ceremony, her waking up ceremony, and when she was sitting down to have her makeup and her hair done, she would entertain. Tradesmen would come in, artists and artisans would come in and present her with samples of whatever they produced: jewelry, porcelain, fabric, dress designs. And I can imagine just sitting there, waving her hand, giving cues, yes or no. But she's not so much interested in the politics, either the court intrigue side of things or the like national level politics, which other mistresses have been interested in the past. Mostly, again, Madame de Pompadour and all those official mistresses that have come before her, they have had some hand in influencing foreign policy or at some sort of national interest level, what the king is going to be deciding. And Du Barry, not so much into the politics.
There is a painting of her doing her morning toilette routine. There's just like her sitting there and her young servant, who we will talk about, who bringing her morning hot chocolate, and she's just looking glamorous and beautiful. So yeah, she was just, people like, oh my gosh, what's this going to mean politically? And it's like, guess what? Nothing, because she just wants to like have a nice time
and help the king have a good time.
Yes, yeah, and that's all that he wanted of her. But people, even though she had been introduced at court, she was not welcomed by everybody, including by the king's daughters, his unmarried daughters, the mesdames,
Mesdames Tantes,
who are just bitches. Yeah,
salty bitches. Again, fabulously portrayed in the Sofia Coppola movie. I think you get all you need to know about them from that movie. Yeah, they're very, very rigid in their like upholding court etiquette. And again, they see her as this interloper. And they kind of pass that view down to Marie Antoinette when she enters Versailles as the 14-year-old Dauphine of France.
Mm-hmm. Well, she shows up. So she's like a young teenager. She shows up there. Like Marie Antoinette also, I would say, not entirely prepared for Versailles either. But yeah, the madame sort of like take her under their wing and they're like, here's what Versailles is like. We're going to protect you, but also we all hate Madame du Barry. So you have to also hate her as well. And this becomes a huge thing.
Oh, it's legendary. The feud that becomes like part of du Barry and Marie Antoinette's story. Absolutely legendary. She gets ostracized, by some courtiers. Others are courting her, going to her rooms to ask for favors. But yeah, the biggest challenge that she faces, I think, is Marie Antoinette coming in and instantly deciding, like, this is my enemy. And I'm 14 years old and I'm the daughter of the Austrian Empress and like, fuck everybody. Which is not a side of Marie Antoinette you often get to hear about. But she was, I think, pretty snobby when it came to du Barry.
Yeah, well, there's the whole thing. Actually, I think first, when she first saw Madame du Barry, like there was the like welcome Marie Antoinette dinner or whatever. And there's a whole thing about like, will Madame du Barry attend? And she did. And then Marie Antoinette, not knowing who she was yet, was just like, oh my God, who is that?
Who is
most
that?
gorgeous person I've ever, who is that beautiful person? Like the angels are singing and they're like, she keeps the king happy. I think
she's here to bring pleasure to the king. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So then Marie Antoinette is just like, oh my gosh. And then she just doesn't talk to her. That's the thing. She never, and that this becomes a political issue because Marie Antoinette is there because of this alliance with Austria. But so it's
Marie
becoming like a
Antoinette,
huge thing.
absolutely. Marie Antoinette comes in because of her rank from birth as a daughter of the Empress of Austria. She is here to cement this alliance, which, by the way, the Austrian alliance, I'm sure you'll cover this in the Marie proper episode, very unpopular. People did not like this alliance. And Marie Antoinette thinks she should be number one in everyone's eyes. She should be the first lady at court. She should be leading society. And she comes in, and the reality is this woman from the streets of Paris is already occupying that role. And as much as everybody despised Du Barry, you cannot argue that she was the chosen one to lead society at Versailles. And she's hosting these parties, which the king does have to demand that people attend so that they don't like completely snub Du Barry. But at this point, when Marie Antoinette comes in, she's pretty well cemented as, you know, the arbiter of taste at Versailles. And Marie Antoinette decides that she's gonna be Du Barry's enemy. She wants to be number one in King Louis's heart, which is an interesting dynamic, I think, because Du Barry is so young as well. She's in her 20s. Marie Antoinette's 14, 15. And Du Barry, I think a lot of her appeal is her youthfulness. So here's this woman, girl, 10 years younger, coming in and kind of representing the new wave at court, the next generation. So there's this interesting like power dynamic just between court factions that instantly comes into play with Marie Antoinette and Du Barry.
And so it escalates like her mother is to Marie Antoinette. Like her mother is being like, you need to say hi to this woman. And Marie Antoinette is like, no, I never will. Then eventually
it's almost an international incident, honestly.
Yeah. Louis and the Austrian ambassador had to meet, and they made an agreement that like Marie Antoinette will say hi to Madame du Barry.
I can imagine the workshopping that went on. Like, okay, what's she going to say? Where are they going to be? When's this going to happen? And the courtiers are just eating their popcorn and watching this, because if there's anything that society loves, it's to watch two royal adjacent women like fighting. We love that. So yeah, there's like this decided meeting that happens between Marie Antoinette and Du Barry in the middle of court at Versailles on just kind of like a random morning. Marie Antoinette goes up to her, and obviously Du Barry, because she's a mistress and Marie Antoinette is the Dauphine, the heir's wife, Du Barry cannot talk to her first. It has to come from Marie Antoinette. And Marie Antoinette goes up to her and she decides to say, there are a lot of people at Versailles today. And it worked. That's all it took. The king
and they never spoke again.
Ever. The king and the mistress were, quote, gushingly grateful for this. Like, it's not even a sign of approval. It's just the bare minimum to like prove or to demonstrate that there's no real rivalry happening here, so that we don't have to go to war with Austria.
It's bananas. It's amazing. And, you know, the madames, I'm sure, were so mad about it.
Oh my God, seething. Again, if you haven't watched the Sofia Coppola movie, a great scene. It plays out fabulously, and you can really feel the tension riding on this moment.
I do want to mention, so just in this essay I'm looking at, it mentions that at one point Du Barry tried to win over Marie Antoinette with an offer of some very expensive earrings, and Marie Antoinette did not reply. But this reminds me that I want to say that Madame du Barry, so she loved luxurious, beautiful things. She loved jewels. The whole affair of the diamond necklace was those guys who made that ugly necklace, that was for her. Like that, because she was so known to like diamonds.
She loved diamonds. Louis would shower her with jewels. That was like the one thing she collected. And it was interesting. I was reading Madame de Pompadour before Du Barry. She's her predecessor. She would also get these gifts. The king would shower her with diamonds, but sometimes she would sell them or trade them, and she would provide dowries for young women in her circle. She would, at one point, she sold some of her diamonds to like fund a hospital. When she passed away, she bequeathed her entire collection of jewels back to the kingdom so that it could fund, I think it was a war. Du Barry, not into being generous with her jewels. She is hoarding them. She loves them so much. And
to her detriment, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. That's foreshadowing. But yeah, but also is a trendsetter. Despite the way that people look down on her for loving jewelry, she is actually influencing like trends. Elizabeth Herman writes, it's very interesting. She writes that in the 18th century, the beginning of the century, court women were only wearing like one type of jewel at a time. They would either wear like pearls or diamonds or emeralds or rubies. They wouldn't mix jewelry or they wouldn't mix gemstones in pieces of jewelry. Du Barry, in her patronizing of the arts, she's encouraging jewelers to get a little experimental and to mix gemstones and mix metals and put a ruby next to a sapphire. Let's see what that looks like. And so she loves jewelry. She just like is very into it. It's her hobby. And she is influencing taste at court, but because she is set up as the rival to Marie Antoinette, there is kind of this dichotomy of, some people will see that as a good thing. Some people will see that as a bad thing. And yeah, the diamond necklace affair is a really good indicator of this because that necklace, it's so gaudy, but Du Barry would have like very proudly worn that piece of that monstrosity. But unfortunately, Louis dies before he can actually complete the purchase for her. But yeah, that's who it was originally commissioned for.
When that part of the story slid into place for me, because I know the diamond necklace affair, that was one of the first episodes I ever did, I was just like, oh. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, this is the woman who would have liked that. Got it.
And nobody else wants this piece of jewelry because it's so gaudy. Somebody described it, comparing it to an animal halter because it would have like hung around your neck like a yoke. So it's huge. And Du Barry is, I think, the only person who would have like enjoyed that piece of jewelry.
Absolutely. But yes, I mean, this is like Louis does die. So she's in this role of mistress for basically 5 years, and then he gets smallpox.
Yes.
And then
he was sick a few times while they were together, I guess you could say. And he's always recovered from it before. And it's never really put a damper on his sexual appetites. There's one story of her like going to his bedside while he's sick. And he's like using his like disfigured hand to grope her breasts because it's making him feel alive. But I think it's 1774, he gets terminally ill with smallpox, which is a big bummer for Du Barry.
There's a moment in the Joan Heslop biography where it says like there was two, it's not entirely a flattering biography, but Joan Heslop says like there's 2 times where Madame Du Barry was like admirable and brave. And one of those times was when she went to see him when he had smallpox and she held his hand, knowing that would maybe give her smallpox too.
Yeah, she's not very popular in the country at this time. People know that she loves jewelry. She's starting to actually be blamed for like everything wrong with the monarchy because in the background, the revolution is in like the very early stages. So there is kind of this other side to Du Barry, aside from the frivolous, like beautiful woman. She does kind of, sometimes her human nature peeks through, and she does go to Louis XV's bedside and nurse him through this illness until she is sent away. Also, I read that the reason he caught smallpox here, I'm horrified at this, it was because he loved to examine dead bodies and had like went to visit the coffin of a girl who I guess had smallpox and was about to be buried.
But he didn't know that she had smallpox. He was like, oh, this is dead body. And they're all like, oh, we can't tell him she died of smallpox because the king is so afraid of smallpox.
Let him. Yeah, crazy. Cuckoo bananas. So the king gets smallpox and he is on his deathbed. And in the past, when he's been sick, his ministers will come in and they'll do the whole, do you want absolution for your sins? Let's do confession, give you communion, and then you can die peacefully. They'll do that whole thing because he's the king. And he, in those cases, sends whoever his mistress is at the time away so that he can be absolved of all his sins. And then he'll bring the mistress back when he gets better. And this has happened a couple times before, but this time, like, this is the big one. And he is convinced to send Du Barry away. And right away, I think, instantly regrets it. He asks for her to be brought to him, and he gets told, like, she's already gone. And he weeps because he wants her by his side. But it's this weird official relationship that is frowned upon in the eyes of the church. So he can't have her with him on his deathbed.
And then, like, that's it for her and her Versailles era. Like,
Yeah. She's
Marie
done.
Antoinette is not going to let her stay. Yeah, she leaves. She
Yeah.
goes off to live in a place called Louveciennes.
Well, before she gets I can't pronounce it either.
It's a very long word.
So that's the chateau that the king had given her. But before she makes it there, she's actually briefly sent off to a convent.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Louis, on his deathbed, is like coerced into signing a document that will basically imprison Du Barry at a convent, the Pont aux Dames, so the Bridge of Women. This place it's a 1,000-year-old convent. It is dark and damp and dank and depressing. Du Barry is going from lavish, like living large at Versailles, to literally, it sounds like living in a cellar. She pulls some strings with some of her allies at court who she used to have like 16 footmen and 16 maids waiting on her, to now, I think she had to pull strings to get one maid and to get some very basic furniture brought in, including a bed and some chairs. Like, she wasn't going to have furniture. So she goes to live at this convent. But remember, she had a convent education. The way of life there, I don't think, is foreign to her. It's just very different to how she has been living at Versailles. So she charms the nuns. She wins over the nuns. She goes to prayers with them every day. She helps them with chores. And a year later, her exile is lifted, essentially. She's not allowed back at court, but she's allowed to leave this convent. And the nuns also, as she's driving away, are weeping and sobbing to see her go because they love her so much.
That's the thing. Like, and partially it's the hotness, because that just makes people like people. But she was just like a sweet, nice person. Like, she just had like a nice, a good personality too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Again, a little different than the Sofia Coppola movie, where Asia Argento is, I think, cast to like be a foil to Marie Antoinette in that movie. And we're seeing it through Marie's eyes. But yeah, it sounds like everyone who actually met and interacted with Du Barry enjoyed being around her.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, that she has this like amazing superpower hotness, and also she's just so charming and nice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just warm and friendly.
Her one, I don't even want to call it a vice. Her one like shortcoming is she just isn't very politically informed and isn't very well read. Like, she's not the brightest bulb in the box, but she's beautiful, she's charming, and that is enough to get you ahead in the old regime in France. And obviously we are headed towards revolution, so we will see if that takes her much farther in life. But Louis XVI is king. 15 had been his grandfather, and now it's 16, and he is gonna run things his way. And I should also note, while we're here kind of introducing Louis and Marie Antoinette, they had an interesting relationship in their own right. He never took a mistress, and I'm sure you'll talk more about that in the Marie episode. But Louis puts all of his hopes and dreams on Marie Antoinette. She is both wife and mistress. And what historians mean when they say that is she is influencing his private life. She is providing him children eventually. And she is a political advisor, which does not turn out well for her. There's a reason that there's this position of official mistress in France. And a lot of that is to take some of the scrutiny off of the queen, so that your political foreign alliances can be preserved and the king can have like some personal pleasure in who he's spending his time with. So Marie Antoinette kind of shoots herself in the foot by sending Du Barry away, because there is nobody to deflect from the court gossip anymore. She is the only woman at court that is going to absorb all the courtiers and the public's dissatisfaction.
That's so interesting. And that, I don't know what the connection is exactly, but it reminds me a bit of Kate Middleton and Meghan Markle. Actually, no, it reminds me more of Prince Harry, actually, because it's like when he was there, he and Meghan could be the scapegoat for everything. And then when he left, then Will and Kate are just like, wait a minute.
Yeah, hang on.
Who's going to distract from us anymore? Yeah, you got to keep a scapegoat around.
it's a real, like, I never thought the leopard would eat my face kind of moment. And Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI have to face this because Louis, not just Du Barry herself, he exiles anybody with the name Du Barry from court, which I think is so funny because the marriage between Jean and Du Barry is such a sham. They never lived together. But anybody with that name is going to benefit from their distant connection to her. So some courtiers that are named Du Barry start changing their name so that they can stay at Versailles, and some of them do get sent away. Marie Antoinette wrote, I think in a letter, she wrote, "The king has limited himself to sending the creature," meaning Jean, "to a convent and chasing from the court everything tarred with the name of scandal." And even her mother, Maria Theresa, is like, "You're going a little too hard here." Maria Theresa writes to Marie Antoinette and says, like, you guys, you and Louis need to stop gloating over this woman. Like, I don't know what your obsession is with her. But she said, you need to stop gloating over the downfall of a, quote, unfortunate creature who has lost everything and was more in need of pity than everyone else. So, she was labeled, Du Barry was labeled as this like symbol of debauchery and immorality. But I think even Maria Theresa recognizes, like, I don't think you guys should be laughing here. Like, without her, things are going to be harder for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's such a good, like, listeners remember this for later on in terms of what ends up happening to Marie Antoinette. But yeah, if you get rid of the scapegoat, then
yes,
you become the scapegoat.
Yeah, because Du Barry, like, she was not popular with the French public, not only for her lavish lifestyle and all her jewels, but because she represents, on a deeper level, she represents the old regime because kings took mistresses. That's what they did. But it was always this system that was like impenetrable to outsiders. So Du Barry, as much as she had like a very impoverished upbringing, she is a royalist at heart and she's a monarchist and she represents the old way of doing things. The new public in France, spoiler alert, revolution, they are now demanding transparency. They are demanding accountability from the monarchy. And Du Barry was part of that system that did not have either of those things. So it's an interesting, what's the word I want? I don't know, turn of events, an interesting turn of events where Du Barry represents these things, but also Marie Antoinette still does as well because she is so staunch in her support of monarchy. But yeah, now Marie Antoinette is the one representing both the official side of things and the immoral messaging and the let them eat cake side of things.
And we'll return to her in a later episode, listeners.
Yes, we'll leave her there.
But Du Barry, so she leaves the convent, the nuns all love her, and she goes to this house or town, Louveciennes.
Yeah.
Which is, anyway, like, it's a huge fancy manor. And
beautiful
she was having
house.
A very nice time. She was, like, she got to go and, like, hang out in her garden, entertaining, like, some of her friends from Versailles would come and hang out with her. It says here, now that she was no longer an object of jealousy and political machinations, these people felt free to enjoy the glow of her charm and hospitality.
Yeah, she is coming off of the high of being a royal mistress, but she does still have those natural charms. She also amassed some considerable wealth as she was official mistress. So she starts to give to charity at the same time as she is building up the gardens at this house. She's ordering statues. She's patronizing the arts still. So yeah, it sounds like it's just like a very enchanting, I'm thinking of like pre-curse Beauty and the Beast castle where everything is just beautiful and lovely. And it is this ancient regime, old world, like type of beauty. But yeah, she would have these parties and she would entertain nobles, not just from France, but like across Europe. People would come to meet her because they wanted to just look at her. They wanted to
They're just
see
like, I've heard that you're the hottest person who ever lived.
Well, and you bewitched this 60-year-old king. So like, we just want to be in the same room as you. Even people who had been at Versailles under Louis XV and who had been Du Barry's enemy would come visit. And on one occasion, a former Versailles courtier came to visit and said to her, there was no hatred, but we all wanted to have your place. Sorry for being such a jealous bitch. Like, we really just, you were too hot and we wanted to be in your shoes.
Which is so interesting that after she left Versailles, people were just like, well, forget her. She's gone. They're all like, I want to go hang out with her. I secretly always wanted to hang out with her. And now I can.
Yeah. Seriously.
Like, such is her power.
Yeah, really. And she, like I said, she is a royalist. She still represents this connection to monarchy, even though she and Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette are persona non grata. They do not talk. They have a very strained relationship. There's no connection there. Du Barry still represents the monarchy. And I think you can see that really clearly because she's painted 3 times in the 1780s by Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, who is the famous female court painter that Marie Antoinette also loves. She painted Marie Antoinette several times. But she's also going to Louveciennes to paint Du Barry. And I think that's because Vigée-Lebrun, also a royalist, also a monarchist, it just goes to show you that there are different ways that you can be like a supporter of monarchy at this time, pre-revolution.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to do an episode about Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun at some point. She painted the Marie Antoinette portrait that then Deborah Wong reinterpreted to be the image for this podcast, for this series.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's like you can support the monarchy while you still like personally hate the person.
The current monarch. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like I support the monarchy.
Right.
But I hate that bitch. Yeah.
Well, and even Du Barry, even in some of these paintings, in these portraits, she is very visually similar to Marie Antoinette. She's got at this time, Marie Antoinette's doing she's in her simple phase. She's wearing like the chemise dresses, lots of flowers, straw hats. There's a painting of Du Barry where at first glance, I would completely forgive you if you thought it was Marie Antoinette. So she is also, I think, recognizing that the current queen is the tastemaker, is influencing style, and she's a trendy woman. She's gonna portray herself that way. And Vigée-Lebrun paints her so charmingly in these portraits. She conveys what one historian calls Du Barry's basic goodness, which no doubt helped to seal her reinstatement in society.
I want to say the word basic is a word that complimentary. I feel like Jeanne Du Barry was a basic person. She was just like, I like pretty things. And I think because she was so beautiful, like she took advantage of the opportunity she was given. Like it's always said, like that she sort of spoke in like almost like a baby talk lisp when she was talking to men. Like she knew what she was doing, but also she never had to struggle really because she kept being chosen because she was so hot. So she never had to really develop beyond a basic personality of just like life is nice and people treat me nicely and everything's great. It's like, well, that's because you're hot.
Oh, definitely. And she knows where to go to get ahead. After King Louis XV dies, she does start a new relationship. She takes a new lover. This is the Duc de Brisac, who was a military commander prominent at Versailles. So he's a monarchist as well, even under Louis XVI. So she still allies herself, even as revolution is raging in the background. It's not quite penetrating Du Barry's world just yet. And she is still kind of just going with what she knows. She's hosting parties. She's trying on jewelry. She's romancing dashing military men from court. And she's having a great time for now.
Everything's going so well. Trademark Moulin Rouge. But then, anyway, so the revolution, begins.
It pops off.
So we're in 1789. The first time that the revolution penetrates her life
literally
is that some soldiers who had escaped. So we're going to talk about this in later episodes, listeners. We're not going to get into the French Revolution. There's enough to talk about today.
Just Google it if you don't know anything.
Basically, 2 soldiers had escaped the mob at Versailles during the Women's March, and she was like, come stay with me at my house. That's cool. And then she just kind of like let various people, she said like, oh, the royals can stay here too. Like I have this great house. Like anyone can come here. Was kind of
I'm such a good hostess.
Yeah, that was her vibe. And then in the thing I'm looking at, it doesn't say in various details, but basically,
Yeah.
some of her jewels were stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And this turns into a whole tragic thing.
Well, before we get to that, I will also say, like, I'm pretty sure one of the first like casualties of the revolution is her new lover. The timing, I'm a little hazy on the timing, but eventually the Duc de Brisac gets caught up in a mob and he is beheaded, and his head is first put on a pike and then I think thrown into one of Du Barry's residences. So again,
wait.
is that
Some of the mob then marched to Louveciennes, broke in, and rolled his severed head across the floor to
right?
her.
Yeah. So like the revolution is encroaching on her like comfortable little world
Okay,
at this
yes,
time.
fair. Yes.
She knows it's happening, but she's still, again, operating the way she knows how. She also is still entertaining. She's still throwing parties. She's mingling with the aristocracy. She lets people stay at her house, which maybe contributes to the fact that 1.5 million livres of her jewels are stolen. There's also some evidence that she is also quietly selling off some of her jewelry, maybe building up like a little cache of savings in case she needs to flee. But that's like foresight. I don't even think she was like, I don't think she was that thoughtful about it. I think she just needed cash.
No.
Honestly.
For one of the things that happened is that so her jewelry was stolen. And then she's like, "Oh my God, my jewels have been stolen." And so then she had handbills distributed describing the missing gems in detail. In
pictures.
January 1791. She's just like, "Hey,
stupid.
You poor people of the village. These are the specific jewels I have." Like,
yeah, it's me, Madame du Barry. I am so beautiful. Have you seen my jewels?
yeah, remember me? Like, everyone kind of hated me for a long time because I represent the ancient regime that you're now in a revolution against. Have you seen my jewels? And then this turns into a whole
stupidest thing she does, though. They eventually turn up in England. She gets word that her jewels have turned up through some, I guess they were pawned or something. She sails to London, which, let me be clear, a lot of aristocrats were trying to do because of the revolution and they wanted to get away and get to safety. She gets permission from the revolutionary government to sail to London. And then she sails back to France. At least, I think 3 times she goes back and forth from London to France in the middle of a revolution.
And it's all just to sort of like keep follow-up meetings about like the prosecution of the jewel thieves.
Yeah.
So this is where she gets caught up with. I just want to shout out Irish adventurer Nathaniel Parker IV, who just seems like a real cad type person. And he was widely known to be an English agent. So I think he was being like, "Oh yeah, can you come back and forth a few more times?" So I think he was smuggling some stuff back and forth with her without her knowledge. Was part of what was going on with this.
Yeah. She later gets accused of like orchestrating this whole thing and arranging that the jewels would be stolen. But I think that's so unlikely. Again, given that she sails back to France, she has this chance of escaping with this money that comes out of this jewelry theft. And she just never takes that out. So I don't think she had a lot of forethought going on in that pretty head of hers. She does return to France in the middle of the revolution.
I want to say when she's in London, a recurring theme in this series, much to my annoyance, are the jump scares of George IV, aka Prinny, showing up in every story. So she goes to London, and this is when he's he's not the regent yet, but basically she just goes there. She hangs out with his mistress, Maria Fitzherbert. She buys souvenirs while she's there, including a portrait of Prinny. And she brings that back to France, where I'm just like, I support women's rights and women's wrongs, but
she's pushing it.
Like, that's your souvenir, is a portrait of goddamn Prinny.
It's like going to Buckingham Palace and buying a portrait of Camilla.
Yeah, it's just like, this is what you chose.
This is what you went with? Yeah.
But yeah, no, so she's going back and forth, and it's like, just stay there.
You're fine.
But she's like hosting parties there. She's like shopping. And all the while, like the whole thing about like the trial of the people who stole the jewels, it's like, well, they're English people. So can they be tried in England for stealing French things? Like it's all just kind of like bureaucracy. And she's just going back and forth. And it's just like,
I would love to see like a hard cut from like the mobs in France, the sea of blood from the Reign of Terror, and then just Madame du Barry shopping, a montage of her shopping, getting her hair done, looking into the theft of her jewels in France, like having a grand time.
It just feels like the way that people talk about Marie Antoinette now is what Madame du Barry actually was like.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like she was the one who was just kind of like, nothing to do with me, like.
Yeah. So yeah, it must have been a huge surprise to her when she gets back to France. And a couple years later, like a year or two later, she's arrested on charges of treason and espionage because of, I think, sailing to London so often, and because she was consorting with emigres, these aristocrats that she would host at her house, which eventually they all tried to flee. So her association with them ended up getting her in a little bit of trouble. Well, a lot of trouble.
And now for a quick advertising break.
What is that smell? It's that slight crispness of fall, maybe a bit of apple cider or pumpkin spice, and I am definitely getting a hint of a deal. Oh wait, it's more than a hint. Yeah, these are the best deals, and not just this season, but all year long. In all seriousness, the smartest shoppers know that you get the brands you love with the most savings and cash back with Rakuten, and I know I'm certainly interested in sniffing out those deals. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Urban Outfitters, Petco, even Expedia if you're looking to get some travel in before the end of the year. And getting cash back doesn't mean you have to miss out on sales because those can be stacked right on top. It's easy to use and based on a simple idea. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cash back through PayPal or check. Smells like a perfect deal to me. Download the free Rakuten app and never miss a deal. Or go to Rakuten.com to start getting the most bang for your buck. That's Rakuten. As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Bingo Blitz rules. If your bingo has ads in it,
that's not a bingo.
If it doesn't have the coolest tournaments, mini games, and the most breathtaking design,
nope, not a bingo.
If your bingo moment makes you feel so excited that you just want to burst in joy and scream out loud, bingo! Sorry, so you're playing
Bingo Blitz? Now that's a bingo. Go for a world of excitement with Bingo Blitz, the #1 free bingo game. Download Bingo Blitz and play for free.
Now that's a bingo.
As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
And we're back. Okay, so there's this guy. I don't know how much he comes up in what you've read, but his name is George Grieve. And he is just her #1 hater.
Yeah.
I don't know where he came from or what his deal is, but he just had it out for her.
Well, because she stands
who is this
for
guy?
everything wrong with the monarchy. And if we want to burn the system to the ground, like people like Du Barry are #1 on the list, it seems like.
So George Grieve, he's an English radical. He had been in the American colonies during that revolution and then came here. He's just like a revolution groupie. And he started a revolutionary club. And he was obsessively it was like the We Hate Madame Du Barry club.
It's
and
like when you have a hater
various
online who is just obsessed with you and like,
Yeah.
they're obsessed with you, but they're just saying all this nasty shit and they just want your attention is really what it's about.
So he got various informants, including Louis Benoit Zamore, who was her page, who was a black man from, he was Bengali. And there are some portraits of, actually I mentioned earlier, the portrait of her being delivered her hot chocolate in the morning, having her toilette at Versailles. Zamore is the one who is presenting the hot chocolate. So
Yes.
he's often painted with her. I think it's a contrast of like, she's so blonde and fair and he is like a darker complexion. And she did not treat him well because she treated him as a pet effectively. So he was all too happy to just like let George Grieve in, let George Grieve steal some stuff, like tell him all the stuff that she'd been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so George Grieve is just like her #1 hater. He's just like, arrest this bitch. I hate her. Like there's one part of the story where it was in the Joan Heslop biography where he's like, she's not in the house and he's in the house and they're describing him just sitting in the room surrounded by portraits of her. Just being like, I hate her. Like
just seething.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Get a hobby, George Grieve.
This is his hobby.
Eventually, it's fair. I know, but kind of like with Marie Antoinette, it's like once you get rid of her, what do you have like what's left for you, George Grieve?
Right.
Like
Shot yourself in the foot with that one.
Painting, like play golf. I don't know.
Flower arranging, something.
Anyway, so on this podcast, you're a hater when you publish a pamphlet. We have a pamphlet moment. So he publishes a pamphlet describing her, quote, crimes. And he says, who am I, George Grieve? Well, I'm a friend of Benjamin Franklin. So you should listen to me. I am a disorganizer of despotism in the 2 hemispheres for the last 20 years. I'm George Grieve. And he just kept going to like, I don't know about the French Revolution, but whoever was in charge.
There were various committees, just these dudes banding together to call the shots. Yeah. Other dudes.
So he just goes to the various committees and just like, I hate Madame Du Barry. Can we arrest her? Can we arrest Madame Du Barry?
They're like, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So then she was arrested. And then there is some evidence that when he went to capture her and or when they were in the carriage riding to Paris, he may have raped her as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or at least attempted to assault her, which, #1 hater, but also obsessed.
Yeah, George Grieve. This is where. Okay, so George Grieve. So he sent her off to be imprisoned. And then he's just like in Louveciennes. And then he was just like sitting in this room surrounded by paintings of her. And he was working on documents with a 15-count indictment. Like I just picture him just like, I don't know if coffee was a thing, but just like staying up for like 72 hours, just being like, and she did this, and she did this, with his like quill pen or whatever, just in this room surrounded by pictures of her. And it was everything you said. It's just like, were you secretly funding the emigres? Were you smuggling things back and forth to England?
Were you
like,
spying
were you going
for
back?
Yeah, exactly.
Or are you just kind of like a silly person who doesn't get it? And I would argue she was a silly person who just didn't get it.
Yeah, and that made her an easy target. You know, the revolution, so much of it was about looking busy and looking like they were affecting change and cleaning house and draining the swamp, whatever you want to say. So many innocent people, and even looking guilty was enough to condemn you. So she was put on trial, but it was a bit of a sham trial. When she was found guilty, the jury returned in an hour after deliberating at 11 p.m. and found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced very quickly. She was supposed to die by guillotine the next morning.
And then this is where, so
she doesn't really get it.
No, everything in her life to this point, like, always worked out for her.
Pretty privilege.
Yeah, like, pretty privilege. Even though, like, she was born poor and stuff, like, things always worked out. So she just had this faith in, like, humanity.
Yeah.
And so she's like, okay, well, when she knew that the revolution was coming for her, she, like, buried a bunch of her jewels and things in various spots on her property. And she's like, okay, well, if I tell them exactly what I hid and where, then maybe they will free me.
She tries to bargain with... It sounds like not even the committee or the jury or the trial or whatever. It's the executioners at this point. She promises to tell them where everything's buried, where all of her valuables are hidden, in exchange for, Hepburn.
Yeah. She's got feelings.
Exactly.
She's like, oh no, this poor dumb bitch.
It. Yeah, really. Because and the executioners agree. They're like, okay, that sounds great. So they interrogate her for 3 hours. They take down her statements about jewels being buried in the garden, silverware that she threw into the pond. She hid paintings in the mill. 3 hours, they let her spill all of these secrets. And then at the end, it literally is like, they're like, okay, thank you. And they tie her hands and send a guy in to cut her hair. And that's the moment she knows she fucked up. Of course, these men who have already sentenced her to die are not going to just... I mean, also, yes, she was a little bit of a dumb bitch in this moment, because you should have let you go first and then maybe shown them where your stuff was. But they decide to execute her anyway.
I just want to mention, like, we're getting towards the end of her story. And as you know, as a listener to this podcast, we're going to be giving her some scores later on, but I just feel like her scheminess is going to be a low number.
Yeah.
She's just vibes. If vibes was a category, she's vibes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was her attempt to try and talk herself out of being executed. But also, I think one of the reasons, like you were saying, like, they were going after kind of anybody, but like, she's such a symbol of the old regime, and also just of like, not consumerism, because that wasn't
hedonism.
it, but just sort of like the luxury, hedonism and the luxury and spending money when people are starving. Like, of course they went after her.
Yes.
Would they have if she hadn't put out the pamphlets being like, I, Madame du Barry, own these jewels. Help me find my jewels.
There were ways to get around being persecuted, even if you were aristocratic, even if you had been at the court of Versailles. Like, if you played your cards right, you could make it out. But she just had no cards left to play. She didn't even know that she was playing a game, it sounds like, until it was too late and she was already sentenced to death.
Well, that's the thing. Every time she went to England, which is like 3 or 4 times. It's
3 or 4 times.
And then she went back. Then she went back again. Like, she's just like, that was a nice visit. Do.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not victim blaming a victim of the French Revolution. But I will say she just didn't get it.
There were no hints.
She didn't get it.
There were no hints, Madame du Barry. You had no indication this was happening.
By this point, Marie Antoinette, like, her lover's head was thrown at her. It's like, they're killing people.
They've already killed Louis and Marie Antoinette at this point. This is 1793 in December. So, like, they've already been executed at this point, haven't they? I'm not good with dates. I'm gonna Google.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, because I'll tell you in a second why I know. But she is executed, basically.
Yeah, January. Yeah.
So, and this is like, sometimes in the reading you do as well, I'm sure, when you hear about Anne Boleyn or whoever, and the way that people compose themselves when they're facing execution. She is not one of the dignified ones, which fair enough. This is a terrifying thing that's happening. There's people there watching. So she struggled, she cries. She had to be wrestled up the steps.
Yeah, they dragged her up.
I like to see this fight from her. I like that she, at this point, understands what's happening.
And she's trying, I think, one more time to put that pretty privilege to use. She's weeping. It's very tragic. She's begging the executioners. She's saying, please don't hurt me. Oh my God, you're going to hurt me. Please don't hurt me. As they're dragging her up the steps. And when she's like physically in front of the guillotine, which guillotine, it's supposed to be humane. And I guess it is when you compare it to an axe man taking 3 or 4 tries to get your head off of your shoulders.
It's more efficient.
Yes, definitely. But she's in front of the guillotine. They make her kneel down and she is begging, just a moment, like just one more minute. Give me one more minute, like, please. And it's just, not very dignified at all.
No. And I mean, nor should it be, but it's just notable to me. Like so many people, it's like Jane Grey or whoever. It's like, and she read her prepared statement.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting too, because we're talking about a mistress, not somebody born and bred in royalty. Composure and dignity is such a currency, especially at the court of Versailles. And especially when it comes to an official mistress. And Du Barry has had some problems in the past with keeping her composure. Let's throw it back when Louis XV was still alive. There was an episode where there was talk of him taking another royal bride, and Du Barry apparently threw a fit in front of everybody. She went into this jealous rage, and Louis kind of sent her to her room and said, I'm not going to see you until you can compose yourself. And it took her a couple days. So it seems like composure has never been one of her skills. And I don't know if that's because of the pretty privilege, because of the fact that she wasn't born to that. She always was kind of relying on her ability to be this warm, emotional person. And in her last moment, that's kind of what comes out.
Yeah, well, I think she's just somebody who got what she wanted so much of the time. It's like incomprehensible to her that something's not going her way.
Yeah.
Because it happens so rarely.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
So it's sad.
Yeah,
she does
exactly.
get guillotined. They do not grant her request for one more moment. She is beheaded and her body is dumped apparently in the same unmarked grave as Marie Antoinette.
Yeah, Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. And that's how I knew when you were asking that they were already
dead.
They're
already dead. Yeah.
And then the Roue was also killed as well in the same time period. Yeah. And so I just have this quote here. So I was excited. The Choderlos de Laclos, the author of Les Liaisons Dangereuses, my favorite movie/play/scandalous novel. He wrote, her only fault was her birth and in those who had debauched and debased her. I think that is not her only fault, but that was kind of him to say.
I think he's saying the only action she took, was being born in a not so great situation. That's the only thing she ever did.
Oh, okay.
I think we're thinking of her flaw as inaction, of being unaware of your surroundings. And I think he's maybe saying the only flaw that you can actually say she did in her life was her birth.
Yeah, unfortunately, which was not prestigious.
Right.
So I'll just quote this from this article. So, by any account, she was impulsive, frivolous, and unheeding, fatally so. Yet she was also kind, genuine, and generous. She never used her power, as she could have done, to harm others, to imprison, or to kill.
Yeah. Just a soft person.
Yeah, exactly. So, child of the people though she was, like a poor person, she never understood the depths of the hatred they had come to bear towards her aristocratic friends, and the glittering world of unearned privilege they inhabited. Which is, she just never...
Yeah, it seems like she she wasn't tapped into the rhetoric going on at this time. She wasn't a patroness of the Enlightenment like Madame de Pompadour had been. If politicians came to her for access to the king, it was literally just because of how physically close she was to him. And if you got in her circle, you would get close to the king. They weren't appealing to her on an intellectual level, right? It was purely access. So, I mean, it makes sense. She, is very unaware, it seems, of what's going on around her.
Yeah, I mean, it gets extreme. Like it turns into like she's intentionally not choosing to not learn what's going on. Like at the point they throw her lover's severed head at her,
Right.
she's just like, I'm just gonna take a trip to England and then come back. Like there's a certain point at which you would think that somebody would pick up on what's going on, but I think she chose not. She chose to believe that it wasn't that big a deal and to just kind of avoid thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, and like you said earlier, that's what Marie Antoinette gets accused of, the let them eat cake line, which I'm sure you will talk about how she never fucking said it. But Marie Antoinette, she wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but she was politically engaged. She did try to influence policy. At least she tried. The really clueless, ditzy blonde, counting her jewels, eating cake, that was Du Barry.
Yeah. Yeah. Like everything that people say, that people assume about Marie Antoinette, it's like they've conflated with actually what Du Barry was like.
Mm-hmm.
And
it wasn't
I have nothing against Du Barry. I think
right.
No,
right.
Exactly. She wasn't like a mean girl at all. She was just kind of like, she grew up poor. She was very insulated. She saw like this Francesca, the woman who was the courtesan, and she's like, ooh, I want that. I want nice things. And then she got them. Like she was basic. She was just simple. She's like, this is what I want. And now I have it. The end. Like I'm not ambitious beyond that. And now I have it. So great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have anything bad to say about her. But we were talking, and listeners, you can, if you're on the Patreon, you can listen to our after show I did with Amanda. But it's like, we're not here to be like, she was great, justice for Madame Du Barry. But we're also not here to be like, she was awful. We're just being like, here's who she was. And I think she was like ineffective, but she didn't need to be effective. She was just kind of like,
that wasn't the point for her.
No, like she succeeded in doing the things that she wanted to. And she got
made the king
caught
happy.
up in she made the king happy, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to be happy, and she did that for him. And I don't know. She's just such a, you know what? Let's get into it. Let's get into the scoring because I'm interested where she's going to land. So the first category is the scandaliciousness. How scandalous was she seen by other people? And I think she was seen, even in a very libertine court of Versailles, there's like mistresses and stuff. The fact that she was lower born, I think, scandalized people. The like working in the hat shop.
There were a lot of rumors attached to her, which that is what scandalized people. And there were a lot of pamphlets distributed about her. There were a lot of bawdy poems written about her. And that is what the court kind of seized on as far as the scandal associated with her. But honestly, her existence alone was scandalous at Versailles.
Yeah. Well, because I like to think about how can we delineate, like, what did she do that was scandalous versus did people just wrongly think she was scandalous? But I think it's hard to say because like there was things like this hat shop, and then she got caught up with a roue, and he was a pimp for other people, and like wealthy men were it's not scandalous that was happening like to society at large, but they were so scandalized by her elevation, I guess.
But then later in her life, you have those same people going to Louveciennes or whatever and saying, we're sorry, like it wasn't that big a deal. Like we were just jealous.
Always liked you, yeah. Yeah, but then if you ask like the Paris mob at the guillotine, she was scandalous because she
pretty scandalous.
Yeah, it's just she's not. I don't want to take away like the choices she made in her life, which she did make some, but she didn't do a lot of things. You know,
she was not a person of action, it seems like.
No, I mean, like she was often chosen or singled out because she was beautiful and because she had a nice personality, but those weren't choices she made. That's just like how she was born. And she took advantage.
Yeah, if she lived up to the hype around her, it was because she was so beautiful and she was able to leverage that and kind of wedge herself in where she needed to be. it wasn't because she was actually doing scandalous things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking like, she did the backwards curtsies. It's like, she worked for things she did. Like she pulled that off. Like that would have been very challenging to do. But I don't see her as intentionally a scandalous person,
Not
although she was
intentionally,
seen as
no.
scandalous.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she gets points. So I don't know where that lands on a 0 to 10. Like, where would you put that?
I'm thinking like a 3 because she was sort of unapologetic in coming into court, occupying this role, fulfilling all of the king's wishes, despite how that looked to people. And she did kind of go against the tide in terms of bathing. That was a little scandalous, how much she loved a rose-scented bath and her hot chocolate every day at 9 a.m. on the dot. So a low scandalous score. I would say 3.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that like there's something there, but like she's not running
Not
around
to
for
the
side titties
level.
out. No.
Right.
So her scheminess.
Yes. Poor girl. Man, it seems like everyone was scheming on her behalf more than anything.
I know. I'm just like, did she do any schemes?
No, honestly, the court factions that rose up around her were kind of, again, using her as a proxy in this fight. It was never for her. I don't want to say it wasn't for her personal gain, but like she didn't cause drama just to cause drama, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then like the Roué like saw her and like taught her how to become the royal mistress, and then she did, but that was his scheme, and she just kind of like went along with it.
There was sort of a fundamental scheminess to her where she knew the life she wanted and she knew that she had what it took.
She would do what it
to
took
get it.
to do
like.
it. Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't seem like there was
No, there wasn't a plan. She never was like, here's how I'm going to get the things I want. But I do think
at
you're
all
right.
costs.
There's an inherent.
Yeah.
I think that another person might have been like as pretty as she was, but that was like, okay, well, I'm poor. I guess I'll just go be a chambermaid. The end. Like she did know that she was hot, and you like with like the talking. She aspired, and I think she used flirtation to get things, and that is inherently low-key schemy. She wasn't just like, oh, I'm beautiful and these things are happening to me. It's like she was an active participant in the schemes other people put her in.
She did charm some nuns. So there has to be some ability to read a room, to, know who you're talking to.
Well, and also I think even being like trained by the Roué, it's like, here's how you can win the king. It's like, but she had to do that. Like, it's not just like show up and be hot. It's like there had to be an emotional intelligence.
She was moldable. Yeah, she was moldable, but she was still a participant.
I think I'm going to give her, in terms of scheminess, like I don't want to give her no credit for what she was able to achieve, but it's just like she wasn't the one scheming. She wasn't writing,
and her schemes weren't very good.
Plans.
When she schemed to get her jewels back, she issued a detailed description and distributed it across revolutionary
France. When she
France.
started scheming, they were bad schemes.
They weren't good.
I feel like for her scheminess, I think it might be like a 3 again as well.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
I'll give her a 4 because I do want to give her some credit for she wasn't entirely just a mindless prop for other people. Like once she was put in those positions, she was able to stay in those positions, which means that she had there
was some self-preservation. Yeah.
Yeah. So 4 out of 10 self-preservation. So significance, and you can interpret that however. I think that her name is famous. I think that she's remembered. Like even people like me, I didn't exactly know what the deal was, but like I've heard of Madame du Barry. There's like, she appears in films and things. Like she's a significant part of this significant story of like the French Revolution and Marie Antoinette. I think I don't know about her significance in life.
Right. Well, it's almost her significance is as a foil to Marie Antoinette. So in my head, I have a score that you're probably going to give to Marie Antoinette for significance. And I'm kind of going off of that for du Barry because her rivalry with Marie Antoinette is probably what a lot of people know her for. Her yeah, symbolism as a catalyst of the revolution, I think more than anything is kind of where her significance lies. Um, the attitudes towards her more than anything. So that doesn't count for nothing.
No, I think that the fact that that the revolutionaries went after her as sort of like a target once Marie Antoinette was killed, like I think that she signified that ancient regime at the time. Like she was significant, and then she was so significant that they tracked her down and killed her.
Right.
I think I don't, this is a tricky one because it's not like, well, she invented whatever,
Right.
or like she wrote this famous book. It's like, there's nothing of that, but just like her vibes and the way that they were sort of today misunderstood as being Marie Antoinette's vibes I'm going to say like a 6. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say 5. I think 6 is fair because if you don't know Louis the 15th's wife's name, you probably know Madame du Barry, right?
Yeah. Well, and honestly, when we were planning this and you were like, I can do one of the royal mistresses. And I was just like, okay, which one? Because like to me,
Yeah,
not having read about her at all before,
yeah,
I'm like, I know that there's Madame de Pompadour. I know there's Madame du Barry, and you chose Madame du Barry. And I'm like, great. And then when I read the book, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad this is who you chose because this is like
Pompadour tells a different
good
story, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Du Barry's story does align more with the end of the old regime and the beginning of the revolution. So in that light, yeah, 6, I think, for significance.
I think so. I'm interested when I inevitably get to Madame de Pompadour, where she's going to be for significance, because it's just such a different story.
Yeah.
The final category, and I will say, the scores and their highness and lowness doesn't mean whether it was a fun story or not.
Right.
she's not getting high scores. The final category is the sexism bonus. How much did patriarchy get in her way? And I think not at all. I think she used it to her advantage.
Yeah.
I don't think
during her life, yes. I think in the historical record, that's a different story. So I think it depends on how you're approaching sexism.
Fair. Yeah. Because, well, in her life, I don't know, because it's more like classism when people are like, oh, she's a prostitute or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, because women who were mistresses were kind of revered in general. Like I think in her life, sexism did not get in her way. I think she was able to manipulate men around her to get what she wanted by using the fact that she was hot and youthful.
And some women.
Fair. Yeah. She's able to use just her gorgeousness to her advantage.
There may have been some internalized misogyny in Marie Antoinette's hatred of her, but like you said, that could also be classism. It could be a whole host of things, honestly. There was this sense that the courtiers at Versailles did ostracize her because of the association with prostitution, where it is about low-class women using their feminine wiles for personal gain. So like there's a modicum of sexism in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just the way that she's remembered in the historical record is just, oh, she was this kind of like sexy bimbo, which
honestly,
she was, but that's not bad.
We just watched Practical Magic, me and my friends, last night, and the midnight margarita scene. Have you seen Practical Magic?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the witches are all yelling at each other at the kitchen table, and Sandra Bullock goes, "Since when is being a slut a bad thing in this family?" And I feel like that's du Barry. Like, since when is being a slut like a negative?
Yeah, and in the world that she was in, it kind of, I don't like the purpose of this score is kind of like people where it's like sexism got in the way and held them back. And I think like there was certainly sexism when the way that George Grieve and like the way that he was obsessed with her and maybe assaulted her and stuff, but and men were also attacked who were aristocrats. I don't know. Sexism, I'm going to say like 2. What do you think?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking too.
Because it's certainly there, but I would say it, unlike some other people who've talked about on the podcast, this did not.
She could have had a much worse time. Let's be honest.
Yes. I think like the men who she encountered often saw a usefulness for her, and she leaned into that.
She was put on a pedestal time and time again, it seems like.
This is Okay, I'm just adding her to the Fredigan Memorial Scandalous scale. She has the second lowest score of anyone ever.
Fantastic.
just so you know, with a 15.
Wow.
The lowest score, of course, is Queen Charlotte, who got a 1. But in terms of people with similar vibes, like Peggy Shippen, who I think is very familiar to you based on where you live, she got a 19. And I think she has a similar trajectory of just kind of being caught up in world events. And we're just here for a good time.
Yeah, honestly. That feels right.
Yeah. And then for this season, this is pretty straightforward though. So because it's the Marie Antoinette season, I have my segment, Nothing But Net, to see how many degrees of separation is this person from Marie Antoinette. And she is 1 degree. She knew her.
Yes.
They were frenemies. Like she was right there. Like they talked to each other. Marie Antoinette talked to her once. I mean,
yep. One time.
That's the closest anyone's come, I think, so far on the show. But Amanda, please tell everybody where they can follow you online and how they can keep up with what you're doing.
Yeah, so many things. I primarily make my royal commentary content on TikTok and on Instagram at Matta_of_fact, Matta of Fact. I also have my art history podcast, which is Art of History. You can listen to that anywhere you get your podcasts. I enjoy it so much. It's just, we take a work of art and we use it as our lens to the past. And I tell you a story from history based on that work of art. So I do have a couple of French Revolution adjacent episodes, a couple Napoleonic France episodes where we never actually talk about Napoleon. So that's great.
As it should be. You also just did one with George Washington, and Ona Judge was mentioned.
We published our Ona Judge episodes pretty much on the same day, completely.
I know.
Coincidentally, which was awesome. But yeah, I do love talking about women from history whenever I can, even though it's an art podcast. So the vibes are very similar. Absolutely.
I mean, thank you so much for joining me. We've wanted to do this forever, and I'm so happy that we finally got to do this. And I feel like I always love to have people on to talk about like a story that is like right in their pocket, like a story that is like one that you know really well, one that you're really obviously passionate about, because then I get to kind of learn at the same time.
Yeah, hopefully the first of many collabs between us. I definitely want to have you on my show at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Like I think you have me earmarked for when my book comes out. We can do some Carolina Brunswick art talk, because there's some paintings with some stories about her that I think will be perfect for your podcast. But yeah, absolutely. You're welcome back anytime, obviously. And thank you so much for taking the time to record this extremely long episode.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
So I forgot to say last week when we started this journey with Amanda, is that on Patreon, she and I recorded a video. It's like an hour and a half long or something, because I knew that she and I had so much that we wanted to talk about, and we wanted to really focus this podcast on just Madame du Barry. So we just had this kiki. We were just talking about the modern British royal family, but also Queen Victoria, and also our respective journeys to becoming content creators. Anyway, you can see that video if you join the Patreon at the $5 or more level, or you can also just you can buy access to it for $5, or honestly, you can just get a free trial on my Patreon, watch the video, and then cancel your free trial. Whatever you want to do. I just want to let you know that Amanda and I, if you want more of that content, if you want to get some video of the two of us, that's available at patreon.com/AnneFosterWriter. And so we're in this, we're in season 7, part 2. We're doing this France thing. And next week, we're going to be talking about somebody I'm really excited to be talking about on this podcast. It's, you know what, this is my podcast and I can decide who I want to talk about. We talk about almost entirely cis women on the show. We've talked about some non-binary people. We've talked about, I think we've had trans men, we've had trans women. Very rarely do we talk about cis men. I think the only other official episode we've done featuring a cis man was Christopher Marlowe way back, I think on Alison Epstein's first episode with us. Next week, we're going to be talking about another man, because this show is, we're broadening the scope. And if somebody is scandalous enough, I need to share the story on the show. And I'm really excited about who we're talking about next week. And I'm really excited about who the guest is. And so I can't wait for you to hear that all next week. But in the meantime, I'm Anne Foster. This is Vulgar History. Hepburn is my cat. She is walking across the keyboard of my computer right now. I hope that didn't affect the recording. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know some things. So, first of all, I mean, we're in this France portion of the whole saga. I think that there's some episodes that could be worth re-listening to again, just because they have to do with what we're talking about. Like, for instance, the Chevalier d'Eon, her story really overlaps with a lot of the people who we're talking about. There's also Jean de la Motte from the Affair of the Necklace, the very famous and very ugly, arguably, most people find it ugly, some people don't, the necklace. That's another one you might want to listen to. And I actually just posted on my Substack, which is where I have these newsletters I do every 2 weeks with just like essays. They're like funny essays. I call people a piece of shit and stuff in them. Like, it's like history. It's like this podcast. I just posted an essay about Jean de la Motte and the Affair of the Necklace because of the whole, because we're talking about Madame du Barry, because turns out she was involved. Anyway, so I do have a Substack. It's called Vulgar History a la carte, and you can find that at vulgarhistory.substack.com, and that's all free if you wanted to subscribe to that as well. I mentioned the Patreon, so you can follow me on Patreon for free as well. I post my thoughts and things there. My various travel blogs about my recent journée are all there as well. And so you can just follow me on Patreon for free, patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter. If you, the next level up would be if you pledge at least $1 a month, you get early ad-free access to all episodes of this show. And if you pledge $5 or more a month, you get access to bonus episodes like this after show that I recorded this video with Amanda Matta, as well as my other Patreon-only spin-off podcast, Vulgar Piece Theater, where I talk about costume dramas. And we have done several taking place in France. Like, we did The Affair of the Necklace, the movie starring Hilary Swank. So that gets into some of these people. We've done Chevalier, the movie about the Chevalier de Saint George. Marie Antoinette actually appears in that movie. Anyway, I also do episodes of So This Asshole, where I talk about just gross men from history. Anyway, and then also if you join at the $5 a month or more level, you get to join our Discord, the Vulgar History Salon, which is just like a big chat-based place where just members of the Tits Up Brigade can all just like share pictures of our pets, and I give sometimes spoilers about what's coming up. Sometimes one of the channels there is called the Flying Squad, named after Catherine de Medici's like sexy lady spy squadron, where I need help. Anyway, so you can join the Discord if you join the Patreon for $5 a month or more. We also have, and I have exciting news about this too. So we have our brand partner, Common Era Jewelry, which is a small woman-owned business that makes beautiful heirloom pieces of jewelry out of both gold and then also more affordable gold vermeil. And what is on the jewelry they're all historically inspired. I don't want to say they all have women's faces on them, but most of them do. And the women on this jewelry, like, she started off, Tori, the owner, she was inspired by women from classical history, classical mythology. There's people we've talked about on the show, like Boudica is there, Cleopatra, Agrippina is on there, Anne Boleyn. See, that was the first one where Tori was like veering into doing not just classical, like ancient history people. And she's doing some more interesting people. She just released a new design that is Cassandra, who is from the saga of the Trojan War. She's the one who was always telling the truth and no one listened to her. And that's I think a lot of people feel like that these days. And then just what came out is a new design that's St. Olga of Kiev, who was, I haven't done an episode about her, though it has been requested. And apparently, I guess it's been one of the reasons why that's a design for Common Era is because it was requested there too. St. Olga of Kiev, she was this... What I'll tell you is that one of the things she did, and I love that she's a saint, because one of the thing that I remember best that she did is that she attached something like bombs to pigeons so that like birds would fly over her enemies and then like explode. It's quite a saga, and she's a really heroic figure, and I think it's really exciting and great to see that that's another person being honored by being part of the Common Era collection. Anyway, Vulgar History listeners always get 15% off whatever you buy from Common Era by going to commonera.com/vulgar or using code vulgar at checkout. And I will also mention the new designs, any of the designs. So if you want to get the vermeil version, which is like a bit more affordable, Sometimes those are sold out, but you can go on a wait list and then you'll get an email to let you know when those are available in that style. If you want to just show your Vulgar History love, I have merchandise that you can purchase. So the most recent merchandise that I have is the varsity, the like Princess Diana fall look. If you're wearing the like varsity sweatshirt with the bicycle shorts look, it's gorgeous design by our friend Karen Moynihan. It says Vulgar History, not being serious about history since 2019, inspired by a comment left by one of my many haters. Anyway, you can get that or any of the other designs at vulgarhistory.com/store. That takes you to our TeePublic store, which is great if you live in America, which a lot of you do. And a lot of you don't live in America, and those people, I recommend going to the alternate shop, which is our Redbubble shop, which is vulgarhistory.redbubble.com. The shipping is just a bit better there for non-American type people. And now that we're getting into the France of it all, the French Revolution of it all, I'm curious to know who you expect to hear and who you want to hear about in this portion of this series. And you can get in touch with me about that or whatever by going to vulgarhistory.com. And there's a little button there to send me a message. I'm also on social media at the moment. I feel like every time I do an episode, I'm like, well, here's the social media I'm using now. But here's the social media I'm using now, which is I'm on Instagram at Vulgar History Pod, where my DMs are open. So you can message me there as well. And I've also been having a lot of fun on the threads. There's so many history-based people on there. It's a great place I found where I can just like ask a question like, hey, could anyone recommend like a good source of text about like contraception in the Georgian era that was not condom-based? And someone's like, oh yeah, I wrote my dissertation on it. Here's the link. Like, anyway, it's great. So I'm there. So I'm also on threads at Vulgar History Pod. And next week, we're going to do a special man episode. And I really think you're going to enjoy it. And I'm really excited for you to hear it. And so until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is researched, written, and hosted by Anne Foster. That's me. The editor is Christina Lumagi. Theme music is by the Severn Duo. The Vulgar History show image is by Deborah Wong. Transcripts are written by Aveline Malik. Find transcripts of recent episodes at vulgarhistory.com.
Talmor, Shishin Marachi. Talmor is my home. My family have worked the land for generations. My gran says the island does not belong to us, but we belong to the island. And we must be ready, for a great evil is coming, and death follows with it.
Listen and subscribe to the latest season of Undertow, The Harrowing, a Storyglass production presented by Realm, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Rob Benedict.
And I am Richard Spate. We were both on a little show you might know called Supernatural.
It had a pretty good run, 15 seasons, 327 episodes.
And though we have seen, of course, every episode many times, we figured, hey, now that we're wrapped, let's watch it all again.
And we can't do that alone. So we're inviting the cast and crew that made the show along for the ride. We've got writers, producers, composers, directors, and we'll of course have some actors on as well, including some certain guys that played some certain pretty iconic brothers.
It was kind of a little bit of a left field choice in the best way possible.
The note from Kripke was, he's great, we love him, but we're looking for like a really intelligent Duchovny type.
With 15 seasons to explore, it's going to be the road trip of several lifetimes. So please join us and subscribe to Supernatural Then and Now.
What's up, everyone? It's Noah Daniels.
Hey, y'all, I'm JJ.
Hey, guys, it's Kat.
And we're your hosts of the Real Hauntings podcast, where we bring on guests who share their first-hand encounter ghost stories and supernatural experiences. Now on to the trailer.
I've been warned to not tell this story, but I think because of the way it ends, it's okay to tell this story, because some people say that with certain entities, to like speak of them or talk about them or in any way like portray them as powerful will attract them to other people. The creepiest thing about it to me is a lot of times it would wait for me to notice it. Like, it would just lay its arm out like this, and then I'd be like, where is it? Where is it? And then I'd see it, and then it would just slither back.
For more information on the Real Hauntings, Real Ghost Stories podcast, make sure you check out Real.fm to learn more about our podcast and many other amazing podcasts.